So the wonderful people over at Capcom were kind enough to send me some never-before-seen Flaming Espinas footage, and in it, I found an interesting trend. This not only speaks volumes for the hunt itself, but for the future of the title updates. But before that, just as a quick reminder, this footage is all from the 2022 Tokyo Game Show build, so the quest timer might look a bit low, and that's just because the time limit is 15 minutes in this build. In the full game, it'll be the normal length, so don't worry about that. Last disclaimer, in-game, you'll naturally be able to use whatever weapons and armor you want in this hunt, so you don't have to worry about that either. Espinas was one of the scariest monsters in the base game. It was easily the most frantic hunt in the expansion due to its armor, status effects, and unrelentingly aggressive nature. Naturally then, Flaming Espinas takes that idea and elevates it to a totally different level. The first big change lies in paralysis. Base Espinas had fireballs that paralyze you. However, that status effect changes with Flaming Espinas. Now, instead of paralysis, it's defense down. This may seem like a small, insignificant change, but it's actually pretty important. Defense down, believe it or not, lowers your defense. I know, it's crazy. This makes the monster far more threatening because the hunter can take fewer hits. This also speeds up the hunt, as now instead of lying down on the ground waiting for an attack, you can get right back up and jump back into the action. This adds to the frantic nature of the hunt and really pushes the central idea that all of these changes express. The second example of this is its double stomp attack. Base Espinas had just a single stomp, almost like he was trying to make sure he very deliberately hit the subscribe button, but Flaming Espinas stomps the subscribe button and the like button. A ton of monsters in Sunbreak do things like this. They punish players for countering too early by throwing out a second attack meant to interrupt the counter. This double stomp does exactly that. And it's not the only attack like this. Flaming Espinas naturally has much more powerful fireballs as well. Notice how they don't just explode once anymore. Now there are multiple explosions for each fireball, making them effectively impossible to counter outright. But what I think ties all of this together is the Nova. This attack is terrifying. It covers a massive amount of area and deals absurd amounts of damage, resulting in a one-shot if you're not careful. This is especially true if you have the aforementioned defense down debuff. And while damage and wide reach might sound dangerous, that's nowhere near the worst of it. Let's compare it to Silver Rathalos' signature move. He flies around launching these mines everywhere before dropping one massive fireball. It's one of the coolest and most deadly attacks in the game, but you want to know its biggest weakness? You can stop it. When Silver Rathalos prepares this attack, his head becomes soft and wide open to bonk. The Nova from the Flaming Espinas is different because no matter what you do, no matter how many times you hit the monster or bonk its head, you simply can't stop it. And that's the general idea behind this whole fight. Flaming Espinas takes this frantic nature of regular Espinas and amplifies it to create less of a one-sided hunt and more of a terrifying struggle to survive. Flaming Espinas is a monster that reminds us that despite all of our fancy weapons and armor, we're still human. So with that said, what does this mean for the future of the title updates? Well, it's pretty simple actually. I think we're going to get monsters like Gold Rathian and Silver Rathalos, monsters that you can go back and forth with in terms of who has the upper hand in the fight. But I also think we're going to get plenty of monsters like Flaming Espinas that emphasize that fear factor, that idea that these monsters are genuine threats to be taken very seriously. Naturally, we'll also get monsters in between those two extremes, things like Lucent Nargacuga for example, but if I had to guess, I would wager that nearly every single monster in these title updates will be on one end of this spectrum. They'll either ask you to go all out and defeat the monster in the most aggressive way possible, or they'll ask you to slow down and remember that these creatures aren't punching bags. They're monsters that pose a genuine threat not only to their surroundings, but to you. And while we're on the topic of Flaming Espinas, why not check out this video on why Base Espinas is one of the best hunts in the game.